Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says he's pressing Jordan and Egypt to take in Palestinians from Gaza. He made those comments while speaking to reporters on board Air Force One. Trump said he had a phone call with King Abdullah II of Jordan and told him, "I'd love for you to take on more because I'm looking at the whole Gaza Strip right now and it's a mess." He also told reporters, "You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing." He added that Gaza has become a demolition site and people are dying there. "So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing in a different location where they can maybe live in peace for a change. It could be temporary or it could be long term." Let's bring in Abdullah Al-Arian. He's an associate professor of history at Georgetown University in Qatar, also a specialist in the modern Middle East. Great to have you back with us, Abdullah. How seriously should we take these comments from Trump? Because we know from his first presidency that a lot of what he says is his personal opinion, what he would like to see, rather than actual policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's reason to take it seriously, in part because we've seen this specific demand being made for over the last year and a half. This was something that many Israeli officials indicated very early on in the course of this war, in the course of Israel's onslaught on Gaza, was that they sought to ethnically cleanse as much of that territory as possible. And that plan has failed. It's failed for multiple reasons, one of which is that Arab leaders who were approached at that point in time simply declined to take on an additional Palestinian refugee population, in part because it was simply politically unviable, whether in Egypt in particular, which was very much mooted at that point as a possible destination for a mass ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza. And secondly, and perhaps more importantly, is because the Palestinians themselves were not interested in this, right? That they know all too well what it means to leave their home and what the status of Palestinian refugees has looked like for the past 70 years.
I mean, we can safely say that the Palestinians would keep that position. They have no interest in leaving Gaza, one would assume. What about Jordan and Egypt at this particular point in time? Because what leverage, what pressure could Trump be putting on them to change their stance?
Well, in the past, we've seen economic inducements in particular. I mean, these are both economies that are heavily dependent on outside assistance. And as a result, there's been a lot of leveraging of the economic power of some Gulf states, as well as the United States directly itself, to try and pressure these governments to play along. But again, the political will is also domestic. And in the case of Egypt, for instance, there's not a lot of acceptance of this among other segments of the Egyptian political and military elites. Similarly, this is true within Jordan as well, given the kinds of demographic shifts, the kind of security arrangements that they would be responsible for. And of course, ultimately, all of this is about enabling and excusing Israel's behavior over the course of the genocide of the last 15 months. And so I think as a result, the conditions simply are not there, in spite of what the US president may say in this sort of off-the-cuff remark. But we know, of course, that in many instances that his remarks do reflect a certain important position within both his administration and, of course, as we've said, among Israeli officials as well.
Let's look at the situation that we're seeing now in Gaza. This is the Al-Rashid Road. We're still seeing crowds of people, many hundreds of people determined to cross into the north as and when they can. They were promised that they would be doing so today. That has been delayed. Do you think we're going to see much further delay to the opening of this checkpoint?
Well, first, I think it's notable, connecting the two stories together, that these images that we're seeing of Palestinians demanding to return to their homes also flies in the face of any attempt to try to forcibly relocate them outside of Palestine. But secondly, I think those delays are in part because this is a very tenuous ceasefire agreement that is built on so many different conditions, and of course really comes down to the question of political will and any sort of pressure that might be imposed, particularly on Israel, given the fact that it has violated the agreement on multiple occasions. I think certainly now we're seeing that it's being connected to the fate of one of the captives and her release. If that were to happen, of course, then that would clear the way, theoretically at least, for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to be able to return home in the north.
Do you think that Hamas has sight on the whereabouts of all the hostages? Do you think it actually does know where this particular woman, Arbel Yahoud, is?
I mean, that's unclear. I think, given what we know, at least in terms of the conditions in which Gaza has been reduced to over the course of the last 15 months. Certainly there are tremendous logistical hurdles given all of the kinds of things. I mean, if this was the case, then I think a lot of these things would have happened in a much simpler and more straightforward way. But given everything that we've seen, obviously the existence of other factions, the existence of the continued Israeli incursions both through the air and also within the territory on land. So there's certainly a lot of logistical hurdles to be able to execute at least certain elements of this agreement.
Abdullah Al-Arian, great to speak to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.